What if a single fossil could shatter everything we thought we knew about Neanderthals? Deep in a place scientists insisted they could never survive, a skeleton lies buried, defying every rule of history, every model of migration, every assumption about their intelligence and adaptability. How did it get there? Who placed it, or who survived to leave it behind? This fossil is not just a remnant of bones, it's a time capsule, a riddle from the Ice Age that refuses to be ignored. And as we uncover its secrets, we may realize that the story of Neanderthals, and perhaps even of humanity itself, is far stranger than we ever imagined. For decades, scientists believed they knew where Neanderthals lived, where they hunted, where they thrived, and where their bones would appear, yet now, in a barren and forbidding landscape where maps, climate models, and every expert said no human could endure, a single fossil has emerged to append everything we thought we knew. And the moment you see it lying in the dust, half buried and weathered by time, you realize that history itself is trembling under the weight of this discovery. Because no one expected a Neanderthal to have walked here, yet somehow they did, and that fact alone pulls us into a labyrinth of questions that refuse to be answered easily. How did they reach this impossible place? Was it a migration driven by necessity, or were they exploring, experimenting, venturing farther than anyone dared to imagine? Or could this fossil hint at something even stranger? That Neanderthals were far more adaptable, intelligent, and daring than we ever gave them credit for, capable of thriving in climates that should have killed them, in terrains that were supposedly uninhabitable, bending nature itself to their survival with ingenuity we are only beginning to understand. As we examine the fossil, every detail tells a story. From the way the bones are preserved to the marks left on stone tools found nearby, each fragment whispering secrets of survival, of strategy, of intelligence. And with each observation, the suspense grows, because the further we dig, the more contradictions appear, and what seemed impossible now begins to feel like a carefully hidden truth. Neanderthals were not just surviving, they were thriving, pushing boundaries we assumed only Homo sapiens could navigate. And suddenly the fossil becomes more than a relic, it is a window into a hidden chapter of prehistory. A message left behind by a people whose lives were far richer, more daring and more complex than the world has ever acknowledged. And the questions multiply with every passing moment. For if they could live here, in this unforgiving place, what other places might they have conquered? What landscapes did they traverse? What mountains did they scale? What rivers did they cross? All while leaving barely a trace for us to follow. And how did they interact with early modern humans if their paths crossed in these far-flung corners of the Ice Age world? And could it be that some of the traits we thought were uniquely ours, the ingenuity, the planning, the adaptability, were actually inherited from encounters like this? From observing, learning, and maybe even cooperating with Neanderthals in ways that history has largely ignored? And as we visualize this fossil in its impossible setting, standing at the edge of a frozen cliff, half buried in the soil and stone, we are drawn into a cinematic scene where the wind cuts like a knife, where snowdrifts swirl around jagged rocks, where the faint echoes of a long-extinct world seem to call to us. And in that moment, we realize we are not merely observers, but witnesses to a story that is still unfolding, a story written in bone, etched in stone, and hidden for tens of thousands of years, waiting for discovery, waiting for the courage to ask questions we never knew we could ask. And with each new hypothesis, the tension escalates. Because the implications are staggering, this single fossil could force us to redraw maps of human migration, to reconsider the limits of Neanderthal intelligence, to rethink the very timeline of how humans and Neanderthals interacted, competed, and perhaps even collaborated. And all of it begins here, in this desolate, remote, and seemingly impossible place where one lone Neanderthal walked, hunted, survived, and left a trace that defies expectation, that mocks certainty and that challenges every assumption we have ever held about who our closest cousins really were, what they were capable of, and how closely their story intertwines with ours. And as the suspense builds, we are compelled to follow every clue, every sediment layer, every fossil fragment, every stone tool, every hint of fire or habitation, because each detail holds a piece of the puzzle. And each discovery is a spark that illuminates a darkness we never knew existed. A darkness where entire histories have been buried. Histories that only this fossil can begin to reveal. And as we move closer, examining the way the bones lie, the subtle fractures in the skull, the wear on teeth, the traces of muscles that once pulled, the scars of injuries survived, and the signs of tools held with care and precision, we begin to feel the pulse of life that once animated this impossible place. And we start to imagine the Neanderthal who walked here, who endured hunger and cold, who planned, who observed, who adapted, who survived, and maybe even smiled or mourned. And that image grows clearer, sharper, more vivid, drawing us deeper into a suspenseful, almost cinematic reality where the past and present collide, where every step, every breath, every heartbeat of this ancient human is frozen in time, yet alive in our imagination. And we cannot help but wonder what other fossils lie in places we deem impossible. What other chapters of prehistory remain hidden in remote valleys, on windswept cliffs, in caves yet to be entered, and how many times we have misjudged Neanderthals simply because we assumed they belonged to a narrow definition of human, when in truth they were explorers, survivors, innovators, and witnesses to a world both familiar and alien. And now, with this single fossil, the suspense is unrelenting. Because the moment we try to close the book on Neanderthals, reality pushes back, insisting we open our minds, reconsider everything, and follow the trail of bones, tools, and ancient whispers wherever they might lead, knowing that each revelation will be more astonishing than the last, and that this fossil, found where none should have been, is only the beginning of a story far stranger and more thrilling than history ever dared to tell. As we move beyond the initial shock of finding a Neanderthal fossil in a place no one expected, the questions multiply, each one heavier than the last, because this discovery forces us to rethink the entire map of ancient human habitation and survival strategies. And suddenly every familiar assumption begins to crumble. How did they navigate this terrain where food sources were scarce, where storms could strip life from the unwary, where mountains rose like walls against the sky and icy rivers cut through valleys with lethal precision? Yet here they were, leaving traces that defy our understanding. Traces that hint at intelligence, planning, and an adaptability so profound it almost feels cinematic, as if a ghostly figure might appear on a cliff edge, spear in hand, surveying the land with careful calculation and knowing instincts honed over generations. And when we examine the tools found near the fossil, crafted with skill that rivals early Homo sapiens, we realize that Neanderthals were not only surviving, they were innovating, creating composite spears with hafted stone points, shaping flint with precision, making adhesives from birch tar that required knowledge of heat and chemistry, teaching these techniques to younger members of their group around fires, whose smoke twisted upward into the night, and each spark from those ancient flames carries the echo of minds far more capable than history has acknowledged. And yet the fossil also tells a story of vulnerability and resilience, because the bones show signs of injuries that would have been fatal if not for care from others, fractures that healed slowly, teeth worn from tough diets. Yet somehow survival was possible, suggesting that Neanderthals cared for one another in ways that reveal empathy, cooperation, and social complexity. And the more we explore, the more the picture becomes vivid and cinematic, because the cave where this fossil lay is filled with subtle evidence of habitation. Faint scorch marks, small tools, traces of pigment, possible symbolic carvings, all of which suggest that even in this supposedly inhospitable place, Neanderthals were creating culture, leaving marks not just for survival, but for meaning, for communication, perhaps even for ritual. And the implications are staggering, because if they could create and survive here, why did we assume they were limited to lowlands, forests, and temperate zones? And what does this say about their capacity to explore, to adapt, to thrive in conditions far harsher than modern humans thought possible? And as we dig deeper into the fossil itself, microscopic analysis reveals more secrets, traces of diet, evidence of injuries treated or endured, chemical residues in bones hinting at cooked meals or medicinal plants. Each detail a puzzle piece of a life that once existed in extraordinary circumstances. A life lived with thought, feeling, and strategy. And the suspense builds because every layer we uncover, every fragment of bone, every chipped flint, every sediment trace tells a story that is simultaneously familiar and alien, a story of a species that was intelligent, resourceful, and human in ways we have only just begun to comprehend. And the more we study their DNA, the stranger the tale becomes, because fragments of Neanderthal genetics persist in modern populations, influencing everything from immunity to skin traits to neurological functions, evidence that they are not truly gone, that they live within us in ways that are invisible yet profound, shaping who we are while remaining hidden in plain sight. And the mystery deepens as we realize that their presence in this unexpected location may not be an anomaly at all, but part of a broader network of migration, survival, and adaptation. A network that challenges the neat timelines and rigid boundaries we have imposed on prehistory, suggesting that Neanderthals were explorers, navigators, innovators, and survivors who moved across landscapes with a daring and intelligence previously denied them. And the suspense is heightened further when we consider how this fossil might intersect with the arrival of Homo sapiens in nearby regions, because it raises questions of encounters, of competition, of possible cooperation or cultural exchange. And what if these interactions were not limited to conflict, but included observation, imitation, shared knowledge, even interbreeding, leaving traces not just in DNA, but in behavior, tools, and strategy? And as we imagine these ancient landscapes harsh, windswept, icy, treacherous, we begin to see the Neanderthals as dynamic, capable humans who navigated, survived, and flourished in ways that demand our respect and force us to rewrite our assumptions. And the more we layer evidence upon evidence, from cave pigments to tools to fossils, the more cinematic the picture becomes, a tableau of life that is vivid, tense, and alive, as though the past itself is breathing through the dust, calling to us, whispering secrets of a time long gone yet intimately connected to the present. And as we trace the fossil's journey, from birth to death, from survival to burial, we begin to understand that each decision these ancient humans made, each choice of where to walk, what to hunt, which paths to follow, was part of a complex life strategy that combined instinct, intelligence, empathy, and perhaps even culture. And this realization transforms our understanding, because we can no longer see Neanderthals as mere brutes or simple hunters, but as a species capable of imagination, planning, care, and resilience. And the suspense grows as we speculate what other discoveries lie hidden in these remote regions. What other fossils, tools, or traces wait to tell us more of a story that is still incomplete, that is still being written in stone, bone, and soil. And as each layer of evidence is unearthed, we feel the thrill of uncovering a hidden world. A world where Neanderthals thrived in conditions that should have been impossible. And every unanswered question magnifies the suspense. How far did they roam? What challenges did they overcome? What mysteries remain buried in the ice? The rock and the earth waiting for scientists to reveal them. And what might these secrets tell us not just about Neanderthals, but about ourselves, about the traits we share, about the survival instincts, creativity, and intelligence that connect all humans across time. And in this way, the fossil becomes not just an object of study, but a key to a larger, suspenseful narrative, a narrative that challenges everything we thought we knew about migration, adaptation, intelligence, and human history. A story where every fragment has meaning, every detail matters, and every discovery keeps us on the edge of wonder, curiosity, and awe, knowing that the past is far stranger, far richer, and far more alive than we ever imagined, and that following the trail of this single fossil may reveal truths that forever change how we see Neanderthals, ancient humans, and ultimately ourselves. As we examine the implications of this fossil found where no Neanderthal was expected, it becomes clear that this discovery is not just about a single individual, but about the resilience, intelligence, and adaptability of an entire species. Because every detail of the bones, from healed fractures to tooth wear, reveals a life lived with strategy, endurance, and care. suggesting that Neanderthals looked after one another, treated injuries, and survived in extreme environments that scientists previously believed were impossible for them. And when we consider the tools found nearby, stone blades precisely flaked, wooden spears with traces of adhesives, carved bones, and possible ornamental objects, it becomes evident that these humans were not merely reacting to survival but actively shaping their world, creating technology, experimenting with materials, passing knowledge to younger generations, and perhaps even expressing culture in ways that rival early Homo sapiens. And the more we analyze their DNA, the deeper the connection becomes, for fragments of Neanderthal genes live on in modern humans, influencing immunity, skin, hair, and neurological traits. A silent reminder that their story is intertwined with ours, that their legacy continues within billions of people today, and the geographic significance of this fossil pushes the boundaries of what we thought possible, showing that Neanderthals were far more mobile and willing to explore harsh landscapes than we ever imagined, moving across mountains, rivers, and icy plains in search of resources and safety. A feat that required ingenuity, planning, and perhaps even curiosity. And each new clue, from subtle cave pigments to marks on tools to the positioning of bones, paints a cinematic picture of life in extreme conditions, a world of windswept cliffs, snow-laden valleys, and rivers that could freeze or flood with little warning, where survival demanded not only physical strength but careful observation, intelligence, and cooperation. And as we contemplate how Neanderthals may have intersected with early modern humans in nearby regions, we are forced to imagine interactions that could have ranged from competition to collaboration, teaching, observation, and cultural exchange, leaving traces in tools, strategies, and shared behaviors. And this complexity transforms the way we understand them, for they were not simply primitive hunters but sophisticated humans capable of art, planning, care, and creativity, and the fossil itself becomes a window into this lost world, allowing us to visualize Neanderthals navigating, hunting, and surviving in conditions that seemed insurmountable. And as we trace their life through the evidence of bones, tools, and traces of habitation, we realize that every decision they made, from which path to follow, which animal to hunt, how to treat injuries, how to share knowledge, was a calculated choice, blending instinct, intelligence, and social cooperation. And it is this combination that allowed them to thrive where we least expected, revealing a species whose capabilities challenge the simplistic narratives of brute strength and inferiority. And as we connect the dots, we see that the story of Neanderthals is not a footnote in human history, but a parallel, intertwined path that endured hundreds of thousands of years, and whose achievements, symbolic art, technology, empathy, strategic hunting, demand recognition, respect, and wonder, because they show that creativity, intelligence, and culture were not exclusive to Homo sapiens but were shared across species. A profound revelation that reshapes the definition of what it means to be human. And as we stand at the edge of these discoveries, we understand that the fossil is more than a remnant of the past. It is a bridge to a lost civilization, a key to understanding how humans of different species lived, adapted, and thrived together. And its presence in an impossible location reminds us to question assumptions, explore further, and remain open to the extraordinary possibilities of prehistory, because each fossil, each tool, each trace left behind may rewrite what we know about survival, ingenuity, and human potential. And in this story, we find not only scientific insight, but a humbling reminder of the depth, complexity, and resilience of life itself, as well as the interconnectedness of all humans across time. And as we reflect on these revelations, the awe grows, for Neanderthals are not merely extinct ancestors, but a living influence, present in our genes, our behaviors, and our shared humanity and their journey. Once hidden in remote caves and impossible landscapes, now emerges as a testament to endurance, creativity, and intelligence, urging us to keep exploring, questioning, and learning, because the Earth still holds secrets that could forever change our understanding of who we are. And in the end, this fossil, discovered where none should have been, reminds us that the story of humanity is far stranger, richer, and more intertwined than we ever imagined, and that every discovery is an invitation to reimagine the past, honor our ancestors, and marvel at the incredible tapestry of life that connects us all.